So we have Kevin, Claire, John, Michelle, and Diane. And I'm going to actually go in the order of my notes here and ask them each to just tell us a little bit about themselves. Answer the question, who are you? And tell us a little bit about your connection, your work as a writer, or your connection to Apprentice House. So Kevin, why don't I kick off with you, because you're at the top of my list.
Sure thing. Well, Zach, thank you for hosting, and thank you to the authors and one of our editors, Claire, for being involved in this. So I'm the director of Apprentice House Press, and Apprentice House is, and I don't know, Zach, if you want me to go into that, or we can wait.
Go ahead.
Okay. So
there are no rules.
No rules. I love it. This is my kind of place. So Apprentice House is one of the nation's only, and was the first fully student-operated book publishing house. And it was developed as basically a project in a course in the 1980s. And as technology caught up and computers were in the classroom and printing technology caught up, we were able to turn it into an actual operating press. The first year Apprentice House was truly operational as a press. We published 2 books. Now, on average, we publish between 15 and 22 books annually over the course of 3 semesters, summer, fall, and spring. Everything for us is built around the semesters because the students are our teams. They are our acquisitions editors in one course. They are our promotion developers and promotion designers in another course, and our typeset, cover, and book production designers in a third course. And very excited by how it has turned out over the years. And I see on here a couple of current authors in addition to our panelists, and some soon to be published authors. So welcome to those folks. And I look forward to the conversation.
Great. Up next, I'm going to call on Claire. Claire, can you please introduce yourself and tell us about your affiliation with Apprentice House?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. My name's Claire Marino. I am from New Jersey, and I am a student at Loyola University Maryland, where I have taken every single possible Apprentice House class that there is, and have worked with Kevin and Apprentice House outside of class as well, because of how passionate I am about working with authors on their projects from just about every single angle. I am studying writing and communications and minoring in English, so I'm really passionate about the writing process, the design process, like every single aspect, the reading perspective as well. So it's just been a really, really great opportunity for me to work with authors and, get kind of a real life field experience as a student. So I'm very grateful for everything Apprentice House has done, and it's probably my favorite thing I've done in college so far.
Great. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I will pass next to John. John, would you like to introduce yourself and let us know about your affiliation with Apprentice House?
Well, I have been a newspaper copy editor for 40 years, now retired, 34 of them at the Baltimore Sun. And for 25 years, I taught editing at Loyola, Maryland. Apprentice House has published 2 small books that I wrote. One is called The Old Editor Says, about maxims about writing and editing. And the other is Bad Advice, the worst information you can find on writing and editing. There are 2 things to mention about my connection with Apprentice House. One is that Kevin Addix was a student in my class my first semester at Loyola. I believe that federal law prohibits me from commenting on how he did, but he apparently survived the ordeal. The other thing is that the semester that The Old Editor Says was being produced, the copy editor, Anthony Medema was a student in my editing class. Or a son of a bitch, but he survived.
Kevin, how did you do in that class? I think we have to go back to you for a second just to get the the scoop of your performance.
I'm going to let it be known that I passed the course.
That is well said. That is a well said version of that. All right, up next, Michelle. Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself and let us know about your connection to Apprentice House?
Sure. I'm Michelle Paris, and I have had a nearly 4-decade career in PR. I'm a weekend writer, and I like to say I write about hope with humor. And my debut novel, New Normal, came out in May from Apprentice House, and it's loosely based on my own life. I was widowed suddenly at 40, and if I didn't laugh, I would be crying. So I thought I had a lesson to teach people. And the best news is I like the process so much that my second book is going to come out with Apprentice House next spring, and it's called Eat Dessert First, Advice I Give Everybody.
Great, thank you. And Diane. Diane, you're up now.
Yeah, hi, my name is Diane Seidel. I want to second Zach's endorsement of the Writer's Center. I would not be here if it weren't for the Writer's Center. My book is a result of taking courses and making connections and at the Writer's Center. I'm also a debut author. My book is entitled Kindergarten at 60, a memoir of teaching in Thailand. And I'm thrilled to have been connected with Apprentice House Press. I've gotten to meet all of these lovely people, as well as some really talented and enthusiastic students. If I could, Zach, share one picture, may I?
Oh yeah, you should be able to.
Okay, whoops, share screen.
Yep.
And here we go. Here's one of the students. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, that's one of the students. That's April Hartman. She was one of the students who helped with my book. She was responsible for the design of the cover, which I adore, and the interior of the book. And there we are at the Ocean City Free Public Library in New Jersey, where I had a book event recently, and April was able to come. So it's been a real pleasure being an Apprentice House author. I can't say enough good things.
Thank you so much. So Kevin, back to you. You covered sort of the history of Apprentice House and went over roughly how it operates. I was wondering if maybe you could just walk us through the life cycle of a book coming through the program. How does it come from a submission to Apprentice House? How does it work through these different classes you have in the different areas of publishing, and how it ends up becoming a finished product?
Happy to. So and again, back to semesters. So we have our manuscript evaluation and editing course, which runs in the spring semester. And so February 15th is our deadline for manuscript submissions on an annual basis. Beginning February 15th, maybe a week or two before that, we begin reviewing manuscripts in the course. And each year we're running into a problem, because each year we are receiving more and more manuscripts. And I'm happy to say that we had roughly 115 that we reviewed last spring semester, so last semester. And we already have submitted 149 for the upcoming February 15th deadline. So the process we go through is we ask the class to review books as a whole, as a group, and so I should say review manuscripts, and we read a number of chapters. There's a survey questionnaire that students are encouraged to fill out. We have a discussion about each manuscript, and they move forward from there into one of the categories: accept, reject, hold for future for further discussion. There are days sometimes if we have many of manuscripts of a certain genre, we will have kind of a battle royale where we get all of those books, those manuscripts together and review those if we see that there seems to be a big interest there, and we'll rank them and rate them from there. From that point, we edit the manuscript. We do a rough edit of the manuscript. We turn the manuscript back over to the author. The author has over the summer to make any final changes. coming into about where we are now, authors are submitting their final version of the manuscript. Very often authors will run it through another editor. We then commence design. And so design begins next week on our manuscripts that were accepted this past spring semester. We also develop, in many cases, depending upon the book and depending upon the author and whether or not they have a publicist, we'll develop a book promotion plan and this gets a little granular, but hopefully by Thanksgiving or a little thereafter, authors should receive a series of advanced review copies, which they'll have a couple of months to be able to look at before a publication date, typically in the spring. It's all a little negotiable. Sometimes there are reasons and rationale to have a book launch in the fall or in the spring or on a specific date. Sometimes things get hung up in the process and we have to delay things, but generally it's a year-round trip from acceptance to at the very least books in hand, if not publication.
Great, thank you. I was wondering, sticking with the sort of process of how the press works a little bit, I was wondering if you could just share a little about your role as editor, and first of all, how that fits into your experience as a student. How does that complement what you're doing? I mean, what are you getting out of this process that you're not getting out of, say, another English class or something like that? How does this process tie into your broader education?
Yeah, thank you. It's much more hands-on than many other schools that I applied to could offer. This is the only program that I could spot at schools in the country. So I have had the opportunity to be a marketing editor, acquisition editor, design editor, managing editor for projects across, genres and from authors across the country as well. So it's kind of funny when my friends are like, oh, I have to do however many, math problems or labs. And I'm like, well, I'm editing a book for my homework, or I'm designing a book cover today. So it's kind of interesting, but it definitely gives me as a student like a leg up when I'm, going to be applying to jobs in the future, hopefully in publishing. I would love to continue this work, and this process has been very affirming for me as somebody who wants to work in publishing, that it is indeed what I want to do. So it will definitely give me kind of an edge on my resume and experience because of how hands-on it was. I already have a portfolio of books I've designed and edited and marketed, and real success stories that are out there and published. And so that's something that is very unique for a candidate or anybody who wants to work in publishing. So I get just as much out of it as I think the authors do. And I'm grateful that people let me, work with them on their brain children, their babies, which are their books. So it's interesting to juggle the student side and what feels like a professional job. So like I feel like I'm working at the same time as I'm learning, which is what I prefer from a class. So I think that these have been the classes I've learned the most from throughout my college career, for sure.
So Claire, I met you about 20 minutes ago, but I am 100% sure you're going to be in publishing and doing great things. And just reach out anytime that we can support you from the Writer Center, because we're going to make sure you find an awesome publishing job, because we're impressed in 20 minutes so far. So
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So going to our authors, sort of a broad question, which is, did you have any publication experience prior to working with Apprentice House, either with books or maybe with individual pieces? Obviously, John, you mentioned working as an editor. Having worked, if you have worked with other places at all on the publication side, how is Apprentice House similar or different? Or if you haven't worked, maybe how was it similar or different for maybe what you anticipated from the publication process? Michelle, did you want to kick that one off?
I had very minimal experience. I had a few essays published in Chicken Soup for the Soul, which made me very excited at the time. As far as what I learned from the process, I learned everything, soup to nuts, from Apprentice House, because they do everything from the beginning of the manuscript to the book being on the shelf.
Great. Diane or John?
Well, I had some experience writing for publication, short articles for The Sun, and I've been blogging since 2005. So those sources were the material for both of my books. Things started out, the old editor says, started out as a series of tweets, and it occurred to me that I could put them in a book and write short commentary on each one of the maxims. And for whatever reason, Kevin thought that was promising. The thing that I really liked, writers and editors in newspaper journalism can be an unruly bunch. And I was very happy working with the student editors at Apprentice House, because they were very serious, they were very professional, they were very helpful. And I think it actually helped when Anthony Medina was in my copy editing class for the old editors, says for the students to realize that editors too require editing.
I think that's a beautiful point for an editor to say out loud, is that the editor is not because you can't do the thing yourself, but sometimes you just need a second set of eyes to find the things that maybe make smooth out a passage. That's brilliant. Diane?
Yeah, my only publishing experience before this was in my former life as a scientist. I had published a lot of scientific articles in technical journals, and I was absolutely flabbergasted at how different it is in the creative writing side of writing versus the technical side of writing, in terms of dealings with editors, in terms of the respect accorded to or not accorded to an author. And so the whole world of creative writing was new to me a couple of years ago. I feel like Claire, like Michelle, even like John and Kevin, I feel like I've been a student in this process as much or more than the actual students who've been working with me on this book. I've learned a ton about publishing, and I think it's my sense, but Kevin can correct me if I'm wrong, that Apprentice House authors have more connectivity with their publisher than most other authors, because the students are consulting us as they make decisions about particularly the design of the book. And I thought that was wonderful. And your remarks about Claire and her future being bright are right on point. But I'll have to say, all three of the other students that I worked with on my book were equally impressive people. So it may not be, these may be students, but they bring a lot to the table. It's been wonderful.
Kevin, did you want to follow up on?
Yeah, I'll add to that the feedback we receive from authors who have had prior book publisher experience and publication experience is that they have a much greater interaction and a much greater influence over and kind of collaboration with our editors, design, marketing, and editing, than they would at a more traditional press. It's been described to me by numerous authors who've been published by much larger and more recognized named publishers than Apprentice House, that they would submit their work, they'd get the okay, they'd sign a publication agreement, and they would get a proof with a lot of decisions pre-made. The cover would have been designed. They were not necessarily asked for input. And we're trying to be different. We're intentionally different because we're coming at it from the perspective of learning. The students that are coming into these classes have basic experience with the task they're about to launch into. Are they a book editor? Not yet. Are they a book designer? Not yet. Have they written a book promotion plan? No, they haven't. And so the first part of the semester is teaching them up, learning them up on that process. And Claire's been through every one of the classes and, came in with the basic knowledge. She could write, she could edit. In the design class, she had not taken the prerequisite design course, but wanted to be involved in it and to tune her skills up over the summer or over the fall break, I forget when it was, and showed up and had the aptitude, above or beyond the other students in the class. So it's a learning experience, and we like that interaction. There is, from a publisher's perspective, there's a risk in opening that door and having that interaction, because what an author believes might be the ideal cover may not be the least bit marketable. And we need that third party discussion and engagement. We have alumni who are working at major presses in New York, and we sometimes phone a friend and say, hey, can you look at this and give us your opinion on this? Claire is playing that role this semester with our current design team, where she's going to be independently designing some books for us, because we have more books than we have students. So Claire may well be someone on the Zoom's design editor. But Claire will also be the one that we turn to as someone who has designed multiple books very successfully that have gotten great reviews from competitions, etc. And Claire will consult. And so she's moved to that level, and we'll have to figure out how that goes on your LinkedIn profile.
Great, thank you. Just a real quick question too. I think, John, maybe I think we know this for you, so maybe the other two authors. How did you discover Apprentice House and end up working with them? What was the process from discovering them? Because I know a lot about presses, but I was actually this was a discovery for me setting up for this event. So, Diane or Michelle?
I'll take it first. So my process had a really long path. I finished my manuscript in 2011, and I thought I had written a wonderful book. I sent it out to an agent who wanted to see the full, so I was excited about that. And then she rejected it because it needed some work. So then I sent it to an editor, and I got 16 pages of feedback that I really wasn't ready to hear. As I said, my story was very personal to me, so I put it on the shelf, but it kept calling me back. And eventually I came back to it, and I got it to a place that I was proud of, and the editor was right, I have to say. And so then I started querying agents, and I queried about 60, and I got 15 requests for full. And that again was very exciting, but they all ended in rejection. So I was about ready to self-publish, and I reached out to a publicist on Reedsy, and she said, why don't you submit to small presses? And she put a list together and helped me put my package together, and it was kismet.
Diane?
Yeah, so my story is a little bit different. I worked with a couple of developmental editors before seeking to have the book published, both of whom I found through the Writers Center, through workshops I had taken at the Writers Center on specific topics, and I liked both of these editors. Both of them had suggested Apprentice House as someplace to submit this book. I was also interested in finding an agent and maybe being published with a larger press. But a writer friend of mine who who knows how hard it is to find an agent, suggested that I be a little smarter, and that I, while pursuing the agent route, that I also think about other ways to be published, including small presses, including hybrid presses, including self-publishing. And I took that advice. And so actually for me, it was a relatively short time between having a manuscript that I felt was ready to submit and Apprentice House accepting the manuscript for publication. On my birthday, it was the best birthday present I had ever received. But yeah, it was again through the Writers Center that I found Apprentice House indirectly.
Great, thank you. So I guess this is, anyone can answer. I've sort of directed to Kevin and Claire. We have several of our authors here and know about the books they've published a little bit. But what kind of books does Apprentice House publish more broadly? What genres are you looking for? What are you looking for in submissions?
Good question. And that is something that has been of great debate in our acquisitions course. We have been open generally to most genres. We have steered clear of some just because we have realized over the years that we lack the market prowess to maybe push out children's books the way that they need to be pushed out, when there are clearly publishers that specialize in that, distributors who specialize in that, and we are a little more into the bell curve of kind of mass market trade type genres. That said, a whole lot of DC Metro, Baltimore area local authors of various genres. And that's just because that's where we started, and we get a whole lot of those submissions. A good deal of biographies, autobiographies, and memoirs. In fact, I would say that they may make up 30 to sometimes 40% of what we publish. And then from there, fiction, sci-fi, romance, a whole bunch of novels, just general creative work. Over the years, we have published poetry. We have pulled back a bit on poetry for the time being. That's not to say that we won't get back into poetry, and I believe actually we will be publishing one piece of poetry this fall, or excuse me, next spring. But again, that's another very specialized genre. And at the end of the day, we do, one of the criteria is the marketability of the work. And by marketability, we mean audience, and by audience, we mean paying customers. And that's a lesson. We don't yet have a course in book publisher management. We do have a managing editor and a student that helps us with all of the administrative side and sometimes the billing and helping us determine the ROI on the books. And that's something that as a press based at a university, that wasn't our top goal, was that we have to go out and sell books and make money. But the university has an expectation that we pay for ourselves. And so we do have to keep an eye on the bottom line. I will say that when I talk to our some of our alumni who are at the big presses, their process is completely different. They have an acquisitions meeting. The pre-decision, the advice to accept a work goes to the marketing department, and the marketing department says, can we sell X tens of thousands of copies of this book? If yes, proceed to the editor. If no, reject. And we're not bound by those constraints, which is an upside. But we've also gotten caught many times accepting work that we love for which there's no market. And so that's a lesson that we discuss in our classes.
Claire, is there any kind of work you're hoping to see come across your editorial desk now or in the future?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I mean, I've loved everything that I've gotten to work on, which has have a soft spot in my heart for memoirs, and so I love editing those, especially because the stories are so close to the author's hearts, and just kind of general fiction. But I would at some point love to try my hand at designing and editing poetry, which I haven't had the opportunity to do, but you never know what'll come up. But otherwise, Kevin pretty much said everything that I was thinking as well. So
So I had a couple, going to the chat real quick, there were a few specific questions about logistical kinds of questions. So maybe hit those while we're talking about sort of the press as an entity. What kinds of distribution do your books receive, to you or Kevin?
So I can take that. So the books are distributed through Ingram, which is one of the top book distributors. Ingram ships to all books with Ingram are available to independent bookstores, the major chains, Amazon, Bookshop, Barnes and Noble, etc. And the books are available in, my last count was 45 countries. And so I didn't see if there's a follow-up question, but paperback, hardcover, ebook are the formats that we publish. We are in the planning stages of an audiobook production course. We have a discussion with a potential faculty member tomorrow about it. But that is a whole nother beast when you're trying to fit that type of effort and production into a semester. So that's one of our constraints.
And just a question too was I think the question is, are there any costs associated with publishing with you? This is not a hybrid press situation. This is a traditional press situation.
This is a traditional press. So we sign an agreement with the authors, and they will receive a royalty based on sales. They receive a certain number of copies as advanced review copies, ARCs, that we send out before publication, to which they can make edits and send it back to us. And then upon publication, there's another set of copies that come to them gratis. And then from there, authors may purchase additional copies at 50% off the list price, but there's no fee to be involved. We are not a hybrid press. We're not a vanity or pay-to-play press. And that's interestingly a question that we hear a lot when we have to unfortunately reject a work. I'd say about 25-30% of the time a response comes back, well, do you offer a pay to publish service? And we don't. Especially nowadays that if you woke up today and decided you wanted to publish a book, you could have it available on a platform like Amazon, by the end of the day, or maybe tomorrow morning if it took too long.
You mentioned that you have a lot of people from the Maryland, Virginia, DC area. Thinking about what kinds of authors you get in general, though, I mean, are you getting we have a couple of debut authors, I believe. Are you getting some experienced authors as well? Are you getting any particular demographics and any sort of demographic breakdown you notice in who you get coming in, or anything that maybe you're looking for as well in terms of those areas?
Well, just from a demographic standpoint, I mentioned we get a lot of local authors just because we have a little more notoriety locally, and as our authors are out promoting their books locally, there are other local authors, and I can see it happening tonight too, and that's great. We love local authors, and especially when there's a local theme to the book, that makes it extra special because we know that local audiences like to read about themselves. Other demographics, primarily over the years, it has been new or young in their career authors, first time, second time authors. Lately, we have had more experienced and previously published authors, and I think that's just coming from our years in operation and reputation that's getting out there. And also, we have authors that go elsewhere and publish a few books and then come back, and we saw them when they were a one-time published book author, and now they're a 6 or 8 or 10 times published author, and they come back to give Apprentice House another try, which is exciting to see.
Right. This is for everyone. I think one thing, we think of writing as such a solitary pursuit. We're often working by ourselves at a desk, doing the hard work of writing, but there is definitely, I think, as we've seen here, a collaborative process. If you're going to publish, at some point, the solitary work becomes a collaborative work. Can you talk a little bit about literary collaboration more broadly, and what value you maybe find in coming together after what is usually that solitary, lonely, quiet, maybe not quiet, but solitary and lonely individual work? What is the value of literary collaboration for each of you? Maybe one of the authors would like to start with that. Diane?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I wrote my book during the pandemic. My story takes place, like my story is the action of the story takes place and ends in March 2020. I came home from an adventure in Thailand and started writing, and I was writing in this room and avoiding viruses. When through the Writer Center, I met people who helped support that writing effort, mostly online. But when I started to connect with Apprentice House, I really enjoyed the fact that there were multiple people at the university that I was going to be dealing with, and also this cohort of authors. Kevin talked about the timing of the release. Most of our books came out in spring or early summer, and the press holds Zoom meetings at particular stages in the publication process where we get to ask questions and we get information about what happens next. But we also get to kind of network with other authors. And for example, Michelle and I have become friends as a result of this process. We're helping support one another in our book promotion work and some other Apprentice House authors. And in fact, for those of the folks who are listening who are in the Baltimore area, there'll be an event coming up at Bird in Hand Bookstore and Cafe on October 3rd at 6 in the evening, where there'll be 5 different Apprentice House authors, all published in 2023. So having that support group for me has been very important, because I wouldn't really know what to do with myself, in terms of getting the book out in the world. I did work with a professional publicist, but having other authors to help along the road has been really important for me.
Yeah, I just want to add, I agree with Diane. We met during this process and we've become very good friends, and we sort of went through it together, and that was helpful to have someone going through it at the same time. I also was a member of a critique group. I've been a member of the same group for 15 years, and we hold each other accountable. And I just don't think I would have finished my manuscript if I didn't have those writer friends in my life.
Kevin, Claire, John, anything on collaboration from your end?
My perspective is a little different, because as a copy editor, I'm used to collaboration. I'm sitting at a desk full of very smart, irreverent people, and the idea that each of us is looking after the other, and that there's a pool of expertise to draw on, is just what I expect to be the case. So when I worked with Apprentice House, of course, I already knew Kevin, and it was very easy to cooperate with the student editors.
I would like to add that, like, part of the experience is that we're all on the same team, and that's something really important to remember throughout the whole process, that having other people on your team is an asset. It's not, even though we all can be tempted to want to do everything on our own, like, it's our baby, it's our book, we want to, have our hands all over the whole project. But, sometimes somebody else sparks an idea and you're like, oh my gosh, that, maybe then this will be the cover, or maybe then we'll change this, so then that makes more sense, or whatever it may be. It's always an asset to have a community of people who are on your team, because then it makes the best possible experience for everybody. And I've loved being able to kind of be that person and also rely on other classmates in my classes, because we do take time to kind of go over each other's like cover proposals or some issues we may have encountered while editing, or kind of like, how would you solve this problem, to our peers and Kevin as well. And so it really is a community and a group effort to get these books and these authors to have the best experiences possible and produce the best work as possible. So I think the fact that it's such a collaborative experience is also speaks to how positive of an experience it ends up being for just about everybody.
From the academic kind of curricular side, it's always been collaborative in classes, as Claire mentioned. But from the author side, it used to be that the author would engage with me, and then they would be passed on to the 2 to 3 students who were working on their manuscript through the various development stages. Now, due to feedback from authors who felt like they were sometimes in the wilderness and didn't know where they were, and couldn't see any breadcrumbs about the process and didn't know what to expect, we've begun hosting, as was mentioned, Zooms, online gatherings early on. So after we finally nail down our future cohort of authors after a semester of reviews, we then send out an invite and pull together a virtual meeting where the authors get to see each other, and authors like Diane, give you a plug, very, very interactive and interested in engaging with other authors and seeking email addresses and contacts so that she could make those contacts and set things up, frankly, like this, which is great, and I think a real innovation. I have not heard of another press doing that ever. It's an author working with a press. It's not an author knowing anything about anything else that the press is doing other than their book.
I love that cohort idea, and I am shocked that more places are not picking that up. It's a brilliant way to build the community and support for the press. Because how often do you look at the colophon on the edge of a book when you think of your favorite book? I mean, maybe we do because we're in publishing a little bit, but I think the average reader isn't doing that. But you might strengthen that concept a little bit of the press as itself as an entity in the mind of the reader through some processes like that. So that's fascinating. So I have some questions that have come in through the chat window, so I want to go through those while we have a few minutes left here. The first one is from Michaela, I believe. I'm a postgrad and I'm passionate about working in publishing, ideally as a literary agent. Any advice on where to get started for someone who's maybe not at Loyola and can get started in the Apprentice House program?
Well, I would say that most literary agents that we have engaged with, and when we do receive a fair number of submissions through agents, we dig in and talk with them, and they have learned by shadowing or apprenticing with other agents, or they've worked on the other end where they have been a recipient of manuscripts at a book publishing house and have kind of decoded that there is a market there for authors to have representation. I would say in a lot of cases, it's the same way with book publicists, where I don't know of a program that teaches book publicists to be publicists. Our course, begins there. And I guess as a student who wanted to get involved in the publicity side and actually represent authors could do that. We haven't had any yet. We've had many who've gone on to be book designers. We've had a number who've gone on to be professional book editors as well. So I think in a field, in an industry like publishing that is shrinking in number of operators, not shrinking in scale or scope, because there are more books being published every day now than ever before. And every day there are more books published. It's just easier to do it. But how many publishers are there? There are, 7 to 6 to 5 to, I think we're down to 4 major publishers once, the latest merger goes through. And then from there, it splits 5,000 ways, where you have these small presses of either editors or former employees who are disenchanted starting their own press because they can build a better mousetrap, or at least also offer an alternative and offer a different experience. And I think that that's where we fall in. But I would find yourself a literary agent, glom on, see if you can apprentice or shadow and gain that experience.
Lots of them have formal internship programs, so you could look for something like that as well. All right. A question about Apprentice House. How does Apprentice House assist in marketing authors and their work? What are some of those concrete things? Maybe we talked about planning a little bit, but not executing the plan. So what are the steps in that?
So I'll say one thing, but then I would turn it over to the rest of the panel. And we make it very clear that we do not have the capacity to be the promotion agent, to be the book marketer. The reason for it is simply a practical reason of books are launching in the spring, students are graduating in the spring. It's hard to get anybody of a student mind to be focusing on anything but a summer job over the summer. And so book marketing and promotion also for the authors who have had publicists before, there's a real strategy to it. There are relationships to it. There are deep relationships that your publicist will have with various media, various bookstores, that if you or I or a student who's just learning the tricks of the trade will have a hard time breaking through. But a publicist knows that, and an experienced author who's done it before will know that. So we provide for most of our books, a promotion plan, which gives authors some basic suggestions on how to promote their book, and that's based on what the students are learning in class. But it is not a replacement for the author getting out there and promoting themselves. And I would turn it over to the rest of the panel.
I would say having the ARCs several months in advance was really helpful to me, because I sent them all out to reviewers in advance, so that generated some buzz. But I was fortunate enough that my best friend is in the PR field, so she got me some press. That's all I'll say. I was just very lucky.
In my case, for blogging and being known through the circle of editors in journalism, I have several thousand followers on Facebook and Twitter. And so I shamelessly flog my books repeatedly on both those places. And that is pretty much the only publicity they ever get. If approaching your local independent bookstore to see if you can, get an evening to talk about your book. Lots of places do that, and that's an additional way to get yourself known.
Yeah, I'll just tell my story, but of all the authors that I've met through Apprentice House and elsewhere, seems like everybody has kind of their own way of approaching this, a mixture of different activities or lack of activities. I did hire a publicist whom I connected with through Apprentice House and asked them to do certain things for me, but not other things that I tried to do myself. But I will say, I think the most important bit of advice that or information I was told was that whether you do book promotion yourself or hire a publicist or have your friend help you out with it, it's like cooking spaghetti and throwing it at a wall, and only some random number of those pieces of spaghetti will stick. So it's a big job. It's I'm amazed at how much effort it takes to get a little bit of results. Of course, some authors are much more successful at it than others, but That's been a huge learning curve for me as well. It's been sort of fun, but also pretty challenging, I'd say.
I mean, there's a luck factor involved too. I mean, for every book the big publishers decide is going to be a huge success, there is some book that explodes and does huge success without them realizing it was going to do that. And so there isn't a science, there isn't a way, even the best publicist isn't going to necessarily understand what zeitgeist is going to happen at what moment and take over. And the only other thing I'll say is, and since Diane's here in particular, Diane is really involved through the Writer Center with other writers, with the literary community. And if you've been a person in the literary community who's given to the community and been involved and cared about other people's books, if you've done that on the long haul, when it's time for asking people to care about your book, it's a lot easier of an ask. There's people going to be ready to be involved, ready to support you because you've been there for them the whole time. So I think that's just, if you're looking about publishing one day, don't worry about publishing right now. Just go meet authors, go support them, go support local literary organizations, go to readings, go to talks, go to local bookstores, independent bookstores, and see what's going on. And being in that environment will really, really help out in the long run. One quick practical question. You mentioned that Kevin, that you're not doing children's books right now. Does that include YA novels or short stories, or is it just, were you speaking specifically picture books in that case?
That's a totally appropriate question. We have published some YA novels, and I would say that our experience with YA is that we have a harder time reaching that market. And by we, I mean the author, I mean Apprentice House, I mean Ingram, etc. You know, the world of book publishing right now is largely based on the push and the pull in the market. And so either there is someone out there waiting for your book and they're anxious to order it and get it on the shelves, and you know, the shelves, real or virtual, or you have a publicist who's out there banging the drum and making noise and getting the word out. And I would say that YA has been one of our lesser selling genres, along with poetry. And I'm, you know, I can't tell you why. I don't know the equation that goes into that, other than it may just be those authors aren't promoting the way that other authors are, and it just happens to be in those genres, or it could be the market that you can bang that drum as loud as you like, but there may not be the audience there to accept your work. We love YA. Our students love YA. You know, keep in mind that our internal market is an 18 to 20-year-old undergraduate, and so there are topics, not even just genres, but topics that resonate with them, and topics that they just can't connect with. And I think we do a great job of getting past that, because we're reading the work. We're not reading the genre, we're reading the work. But we do have, you know, fairly deep conversations about certain topics, certain pitches that we receive, and sometimes about genres.
There's one question I missed up at the beginning about agents, and Apprentice House isn't, and I assume you're not getting agent submissions in general, and a talk on agents could be its own hour or 7-hour long discussion, so we're not gonna be able to do anything big here. But if any of you writers or publishers have any experience or quick advice on agenting that you could give, and then also someone mentioned Readsy earlier and having used Readsy, so any experience with using Readsy for whoever mentioned that earlier as well.
I'll quickly say that about 15% of our publications are from third-party publicists. From third-party agents. I'm sorry.
Great.
I've used Readsy. You can get editors, and I found the person who actually got me in touch with Apprentice House on Reedsy too. It's a good source for if you need like, you know, an ad hoc, someone to help you to get something done.
I mean, I'll throw in that the getting an agent if you need an agent can be an incredibly slow process. And if you query one agent, you're querying, I think, Michelle, you said 60, and I don't even think that's exhaustive. So it took me 2 novel manuscripts in 4 years to get my first agent. So, and that was hundreds of queries. So it's persistence is the one thing I'd say on agenting. Pay attention to feedback you get, because if it's consistent feedback, then maybe you need to do it, but so much is personal and so much is hard to read into. It's a slog. It is a slog. That is the answer. You may have answered your own question. It is a slog, and the only way to do is to conquer the slog is through persistence. So just real quick, let everyone go through this if they want to. A final question would be, what advice would you give to someone considering sending their work to Apprentice House? Claire, we haven't heard from you in a minute. Maybe let's start with you. What's a piece of advice for someone sending their work to Apprentice House?
Sure, thank you. I would say just make sure it's finished. We only accept finished manuscripts, and also as polished as possible. Just makes the editing process easier for everybody and go a lot more smoothly. I think that the more you put your heart into it, the more you'll get out of it. That's in everything generally, but especially in this, the more you put in, the more you get out. So that's kind of just my general advice.
Anybody else?
Sure. I'll just sort of piggyback on something Kevin said about the students maybe not relating to some pieces, some manuscripts or some genres more than others. I would say don't prejudge this process and don't prejudge these students. I thought that the audience for my book was people of a certain age, kind of baby boomer types. My book is about a second act story, doing something in retirement that you never thought you would do before. And I was just thrilled that these 18, 19, 20-year-old students who were evaluating manuscripts came back and said, we want to publish your book. Your book spoke to us. So, don't sell them short. Don't sell yourself short. Go for it.
Anyone else? All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our hour. And I just want to thank Michelle, Claire, Kevin, John, and Diane for all coming out and being part of this conversation. Diane introduced this event to us, so thank you for doing it. Kevin, thanks for helping set it up as well, and to everyone on the panel. This was a great conversation. But I've learned so much more about Apprentice House, and I hope those of you have learned a little bit about their publishing process and maybe publishing in general. So thanks everyone for coming out, and we hope we'll see you again soon at a Writer Center event in the near future.